At this channel, we specialize in showcasing recent archaeological discoveries. When we're not creating exciting, discovery-packed videos, we're busy searching the news for the most remarkable finds from around the world. There's always something incredible to uncover, so you can count on us to keep bringing you collections of these amazing discoveries. Let's dive in. Most of the ancient Roman figurines that have survived to the present day are made from stone, but there are rare exceptions. One of those rare exceptions is this wooden figure, which was found by archaeologists in Buckinghamshire, England, who were working through ground that's been earmarked for the construction of a new railway. It's the first discovery of its kind for more than a century, and has survived only because it was buried in a waterlogged ditch. It's badly decayed, but it's still identifiable as a figurine of a human wearing a knee-length tunic. Experts are split over whether or not the figure is wearing a hat. It's just over 2 feet tall, but would have been taller before it lost its lower legs. The purpose of the figurine is unknown, so archaeologists have speculated that it may have been thrown into the ditch as an offering to the gods. However, that's a standard explanation used by archaeologists all the time when they don't have a better explanation, so we probably shouldn't put too much stock in it. The figurine is the first significant find at the site, but its presence suggests that it's worth carrying on with the excavation in the hope of finding more. A discovery that happened in January 2023 is an ancient ritual center found in Stone, England. The site was used by the Romans during the era of Roman occupation in the British Isles, but it's far older than that. Studies were still ongoing at the time this video was made, but experts currently believe that the site has been a focal point for communal religious and ritual activity for more than 4,000 years. Once it was established, it remained in use for more than 2,000 years. We can say that with confidence because both Roman and Bronze Age artifacts have been unearthed at the site. The biggest of the Bronze Age discoveries is a specific type of burial mound known as a barrow. Archaeologists opened the barrow and were surprised to find that while it contained 5 burial urns, all of them were empty. It doesn't seem that the barrow was ever used for human burials, which implies that it may have had a symbolic use instead. If that's the case, we'll probably never fully understand the site. Back in the UK, an amazing discovery was made in Poulton, Cheshire, when archaeologists went digging through a pile of ancient trash. To their amazement, the enormous piles of junk turned out to be all that remains of an Iron Age village. The dozen or so Celtic Iron Age roundhouses that used to exist here have long since disappeared, but the deep ditches that were dug around them to dispose of daily trash survived, thanks to the clay soil that preserved their contents. The village once stood on the banks of the River Dee in the area that's now a farmer's field. Items pulled from the ditch include a decorated antler toggle thrown away by its owner approximately 3,000 years ago. There are over 5,000 individual artifacts in the ditches, so processing them all is a job that's going to take a lot of time. Already, though, the team at the site has found broken pottery containers that were used to transport salt and meat. They think the village might have been a trade center, making use of the river to transport goods to and from the settlements around them. Other surprising discoveries include stone anvils and molds, which indicate that the people who lived here smelted copper and iron. Here's another discovery from January 2023. There's a well-known archaeological site in China called Changsha. It's on the side of a mountain, and archaeologists have been there for several years. They may have just made their greatest discovery to date. It's a cluster of 21 vertical pit tombs from which more than 200 artifacts have been recovered. Experts believe that the tombs are around 2,000 years old and may have been dug for members of an ancient royal family. Specifically, these could be the remains of the royals of the Western Han Dynasty. The idea that these people might be a family comes from the fact that they were buried so close together, both literally and in terms of the time of the burials. The idea they might be royal comes from the quality of the goods they were buried with. Tao Hauling Han Tomb, another royal burial site, isn't far from the site of these newly discovered pits, so it's possible that there's a connection. Most of the grave goods are of a type well known to Chinese historians, but mystery surrounds a pair of iron relics decorated with talc and glaze. If you're familiar with the school of Jewish mysticism known as the Kabbalah, you'll probably also be familiar with the name Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, also known as the Arizal, the Ari, and the Holy Ari. The 16th century figure is thought of as the founder of modern Kabbalah. In February 2022, some of his personal correspondence was found inside an antique book in the National Library of Israel. It's a letter to the Arizal rather than from him, and was written by a man named David who hoped to receive support for a planned fundraising event. Kabbalists are delighted with the discovery because it's one of the oldest artifacts ever found that supports the Arizal's existence, activities, and supposed standing in the religious community. None of the manuscripts that he supposedly wrote has survived to the present day, and almost everything we know about him comes from the records of the students he taught at Safed. It was Rabbi Chaim Vital who spread Arizal's name across the Middle East, not the Arizal himself. The fact that someone saw him as a figure worth writing to in the hope of receiving financial backing suggests that at least some of the stories connected with his life might be true. Archaeological discoveries don't come much scarier than this one. In September 2022, archaeologists discovered 36 headless human bodies at the site of a large Stone Age settlement in Vribel, western Slovakia. Too much time has passed since these people were killed to determine why it happened, but historians think their deaths might have been a part of a primitive cult ceremony. If so, it's a ceremony that happened somewhere around 7,250 years ago. The remains of the victims were found close in a ditch, close to one of the entrances to the settlement. To make matters worse, almost all of the victims were juveniles. The full history of the settlement is unknown, but its size makes it unusual. With a total area of 20 hectares, it's larger than both Troy and Mycenae, both of which were founded and populated at around the same time. Experts think that around 1,000 people lived here during the town's peak era and have expressed surprise that the buildings were intelligently positioned around streets in a design not unlike modern city planning. These people were clearly intelligent and sophisticated, but they were also clearly brutal. Speaking of monuments to great rulers, here's a 4,200-year-old funerary temple that was recently found within the Saqqara necropolis in Egypt. When the necropolis was created, it was a part of Memphis, which was the capital of ancient Egypt long before Cairo. The entire area is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and includes the Pyramid of Dosser. The funerary temple is also a tomb and was found directly opposite the Pyramid of King Teti. Carved into an internal wall of the temple is the name Queen Nayat. It's likely that she was the wife of King Teti, which would explain the positioning of her funerary temple. It's also likely that a small pyramid nearby that was erected at about the same time was probably also dedicated to her memory. Despite the obvious social status of this queen and the effort that went into commemorating her, there's no other record of her in Egyptian history. The life and accomplishments of King Teti are well documented, but his queen doesn't even get so much as a mention in the history books. Perhaps the planned full excavation and study of her funerary temple will tell us more about her. Objects buried in shallow earth are often found by civilians or archaeologists who know where to look. But when something's been buried much more deeply, it often takes major construction works to bring them to the surface. That was the case with this collection of ancient Greek artifacts discovered during the construction of a metro network below the streets of Thessaloniki in April 2019. The most astounding discoveries are ornate statues of Aphrodite, the famous ancient Greek goddess. But there are also rings, gold reeds, and countless pieces of pottery. So many artifacts have been discovered that the metro project had to be delayed while archaeologists came in to extract everything from the ground safely. Aside from the objects, researchers also discovered the Decumanus Maximus stone road that would have been the main street in the city during the 6th century and remains of what may have been the city's first ever Christian church. Taken together, the artifacts demonstrate that Thessaloniki was once a powerful trading city and center of religion, and likely remained so for 1,000 years before falling from prominence in the medieval era. As of the beginning of 2023, the total number of artifacts recovered is in excess of 300,000, and the project is ongoing. We imagine that you've all heard of the Terracotta Army in China. What you might not know is that even now, almost 50 years after the original discovery of the Terracotta Army, more of its members are still being discovered. The discovery of a further 20 members of the army was confirmed by archaeologists in China on February 11, 2022. Like all the others, they were found together in a pit close to the suspected tomb of Xianxiu Hongdi, the first emperor of China. He died in the year 210 BCE and was honored with the greatest and most elaborate tomb construction in human history. As of 2022, over 2,000 members of the Terracotta Army have been unearthed, but experts at the site suspect that there might still be a further 8,000 waiting to be discovered. This latest set of 20 is mostly made up of infantry, some of whom are accompanied by chariots. Although there are also a few generals among the set, they're easy to identify because of their headgear, which marks them out as superior to the rank-and-file soldiers. The remains of the emperor are yet to be found, but we'll get there eventually. When the Nazis invaded Poland at the beginning of the Second World War, the country's Jewish population had to flee. In doing so, they often attempted to hide their valuables in the hope that they would one day be able to return for them. Tragically, that was often a vain hope. In January 2023, a damaged wooden chest was found buried in the foundations of a building during renovation work in Lodz. The chest was taken to archaeologists who opened it and found a collection of more than 400 objects, some of which are Judaica. All of the objects were carefully wrapped in newspapers before they were placed in a box, a fact which means the time of the burial can be confirmed as October 1939. Included in the collection are menorahs, Hanukkahs, pieces of the Talmud, holy vessels, and more personal objects like perfume bottles, items of clothing, and silver plate tableware. It's likely that this is everything the family owned that they believed was worth keeping, but they couldn't take with them when they fled. Those Jews who remained in Lodz, approximately 150,000 of them, were forced to move to a ghetto in the northeast of Lodz in February 1940. We're heading back to England now, where a team of archaeologists in Gloucester have unearthed a medieval-era tiled floor at a site earmarked for the construction of a new £107 million housing and commercial development. This is a discovery from early February 2022. So work on the site is ongoing, but it's thought that the floor dates back to the 13th century. This discovery might settle a long-running debate between local historians. The glazed green and white tiles are probably part of the cloister of Whitefriars Carmelite Friary. Historians in Gloucester have always known that the friary existed during medieval times, but have never been 100% sure where it stood. Now it appears they finally have an answer. The lack of information has always been something of an anomaly because the friary stood for more than 300 years and played an important role in the lives of the city's medieval residents, but wasn't even clearly marked on any of the maps of the time. What will happen to the site now is unknown. The construction work will still go ahead, so in theory, any archaeological evidence at the site will be destroyed. It might be best to dig it all up so it can be moved elsewhere and preserved. Old coins are found all over the world every day and don't usually make for good discovery stories. There are exceptions to that statement though, and here's one of them. It's a massive hoard of bronze coins weighing 1.5 tons, and it was found in the Chinese village of Shangduan, Jiangsu Province in December 2022. All of the coins were minted within 100 years of each other, beginning in the late Tang Dynasty era of the 9th century and ending in the Song Dynasty era of the 10th. At the time of their discovery, the coins were still held together by straw ropes passed through the holes in the center and arranged in neat piles. It's clear that the act of burial was deliberate and was probably intended as a means of safeguarding the hoard. For whatever reason, nobody ever returned and dug the coins back up again. There was a battle between Song and Jin troops close to the site of this discovery in the 10th century. So archaeologists have speculated that there was once a military camp here and that the coins were the wages of soldiers. Speaking of mummies and mummification, a whole 14 pre-Inca mummies were recently discovered at the archaeological site of Cajamarquilla in Peru, not far from the Peruvian capital city of Lima. The mummies range in age between 800 and 1,000 years. 6 of them are children, but the remainder are adults. Only 2 of the adults are female. It's possible that the remains represent several generations of the same family, but there's a grislier theory. Some of the archaeologists responsible for the find suspect that they might have been sacrificed at the time of the burial of an elite local figure whose tomb was found close to here in 2021. They would have been intended to become the elite figure's servants in the afterlife. However, there's some evidence that contradicts that idea. The mummies were buried with personal goods, including knitting tools, ceramic pots, and calabashes. Sacrificial victims don't tend to be buried with any grave goods at all. So maybe these people escaped that grim fate after all. The pre-Columbian people of the Andes believed that biological death marked the transition of the soul to another world. So fear of death might not have been common. Here's a new discovery that comes from a well-established archaeological site. During the 1980s, grave robbers accidentally discovered a rich and historically significant tomb in Tel Losak National Park, close to Jerusalem. It's since been named the Tomb of Salome, after a woman who's said to have assisted in the birth of Jesus Christ, even though there's no provable connection between the tomb and the biblical figure. Fresh excavations were carried out within the tomb in December 2022 and yielded a collection of small artifacts, including several so-called pilgrims' lamps. The presence of pilgrims' lamps is significant because it proves that the space has been considered sacred for many centuries. Based on the evidence revealed by the new excavations, it seems that this was initially a Jewish burial chamber from the Roman period, but was reoccupied by a Christian chapel during the Byzantine period and continued to attract pilgrims and worshippers during the region's early Islamic years. While Salome was almost certainly never buried here, there was a cult of Salome during the 5th century. It's possible that this is a space that followers of the cult once used. We can always rely on Egypt to provide us with a constant stream of archaeological discoveries. And here's a real slam dunk. It's the largest embalming cache ever found in the country, and it's been discovered in Abusir. Experts from the Czech Institute of Egyptology at Prague's Charles University have been at the site for some time excavating a 26th dynasty cemetery. But to their immense surprise, they found the tools used to mummify the people buried here, as well as the remains of the people themselves. It seems that after the work was done, the cache was deposited in a large shaft in the westernmost corner of the cemetery. It's made up of over 350 pottery storage jars containing the residues and remnants of various embalming materials bunched together in 14 distinct clusters. Some of them are puzzling. Archaeologists have found 4 matching limestone jars bearing inscriptions identifying them as belonging to Wahabra Mary IX, son of Lady Irturu. Despite the clear dedication, it doesn't seem that the jars were ever used. Perhaps Wahabra Mary IX was seriously ill and expected to die, but subsequently recovered. Or perhaps his relatives weren't happy with the quality of the work. You don't often hear about archaeological discoveries in Finland, so let's try to change that. In December 2022, archaeologists confirmed the discovery of a Bronze Age monument in the city of Turku, which is Finland's oldest city. We've used the word discovered, but the reality is that it's been hiding in plain sight for a very long time. The monument's a little more than a pile of stones, measuring roughly 30 feet long and 20 feet across. But it's only 1 foot tall. The correct way to refer to it is to call it a cairn, and experts believe when it was first made, it was probably significantly taller and more compact. It's hard to say exactly when that was, but was at least 3,500 years ago. Cairns were often created for burials during the Bronze Age, but Finnish historians don't believe that to be the case here. It was erected at the highest point of a hill that overlooks the Ara River, so it's perhaps more likely that it was a territory marker. There are no human remains within the cairn, nor any sign that it contained one. Our next discovery comes from the Croatian island of Var, or to be more precise, from beneath its streets. Archaeologists on the island are currently celebrating the discovery of an intricate and beautiful Roman-era mosaic. They think the geometric mosaic was part of a large Roman villa that once stood there. The mosaic is just 2 feet below street level, so it's thought to be a near miracle that it hasn't been extensively damaged by water intrusion. The threat of water intrusion is even worse now that the mosaic has been exposed. This part of the island is very close to sea level, and flooding is a routine problem. Archaeologists and residents both hope that the funding will be provided for a plexiglass cover so the mosaic can be protected from the elements while remaining visible to all who walk down the street. Before that can be done, though, further excavations will have to be carried out. The experts need to know how much of the mosaic is still there beneath the ground before they can work out how to best protect it. Egyptian burials containing elite members of the ancient civilization are known to contain some of the most exquisite and enigmatic grave goods in the world. Archaeologists in Egypt are used to seeing exotic goods in the tombs they open, but in January 2023, a group of them confirmed the discovery of something they described as extraordinary and deeply strange in the Theban necropolis. They're referring to the finding of 9 crocodile heads. The ancient Egyptians often mummified and buried animals for a variety of reasons, but this is the first time that reptile remains have been found inside the tombs of humans. The skulls were deliberately placed within the burial chamber of an individual called Keti when they were laid to rest around 4,000 years ago. They were young Nile crocodiles and were presumably killed specifically for the burial. Keti was a chancellor and held high rank in the court of the pharaoh, Mentuhotep II, so his burial would have been an elaborate ceremony. It's possible that crocodiles were significant to Keti for personal reasons, or he may have been a member of the cult of Sobek, which worshipped the crocodile-headed god. The most personal discoveries we can make about our ancient ancestors are their bones. Even bones crumble away to nothing if given enough time, which makes this 5,000-year-old bone all the more remarkable. It was found in the River Thames in London, England in February 2022. It's a femur bone, part of the upper leg, and was found laying on the rocky riverbed at high tide by a local graphic designer out on a morning row. Simon Hunt, who made the discovery, says the bone is in such good condition that he initially feared that he might have found the remains of someone who'd passed away only recently. He was so concerned that he even called the police, but they sent the femur away for testing and told him it belonged to someone who passed away between 3516 BCE and 3365 BCE. They were alive before the creation of the pyramids of Giza, or more locally, Stonehenge. It had likely spent thousands of years buried in mud before eventually being disturbed by the tide and coming loose. Simon hopes the British Museum might be interested in it, but for now, it's on a bookshelf in his house. Our next artifact isn't so much a new discovery as it is one that's recently been returned home. It's this stunning relic known as Precious Blood of Christ, which was stolen from Ficap Abbey Church in Normandy, France in June 2022. It's one of the Catholic Church's most sacred relics and is said by the faithful to contain the blood of Jesus Christ collected when he was crucified 2,000 years ago. Police in France were never able to determine who stole the sacred object, but it was spontaneously returned 2 months after it was stolen. The thief or thieves left the precious blood of Christ on the doorstep of the Dutch art detective Arthur Brand. Less than 10% of stolen art is ever recovered, so this artifact has defied the odds. We'll never know why the thieves gave it back, but it's possible that they didn't know how famous the object was until they stole it, after which they quickly have realized they'd never be able to sell it without being caught. On the other hand, perhaps the idea of stealing the blood of Christ was a little too much for them to deal with when they reflected on it. The history of Amorium in Turkey is long and glorious. It was an important city in the Kingdom of Phrygia, where it was founded 2,300 years ago. By the 5th century, it was one of the most important trading centers in the Byzantine Empire and stayed that way until it was sacked by marauding Arabs in 838. Even after the sacking, the city remained inhabited until the 11th century. There's almost nobody living there now. But in February 2022, archaeologists found a pair of very rare swords in the city's ruins. One of them was discovered directly beneath an ancient church, and so many have been a votive offering. Weapons of this kind are known as ring pommel swords and were popular between the 11th and 12th centuries. However, the one found beneath the church features a metal crossguard inserted into the end of the handle perpendicular to the blade. It's the only ring pommel sword with this feature ever to be discovered. Swords like this were far more popular in China than they ever were in the Byzantine Empire. But the fact that they've been found here suggests there may have once been a production facility in the area. We all know that the ancient Roman city of Pompeii was doomed by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in the year 79. But how much do we know about life in this city before the volcano erupted? Thanks to some new discoveries from mid-2022, the answer to that question is much more than we used to. The excavations of the past have focused mostly on Pompeii's grand villas, which belong to the city's wealthiest residents. Since 2018, a new project is focused on digging out the remains of the city's less well-heeled residents. It seems that even those who didn't live in Pompeii's villas lived a relatively middle-class life for the time. The latest house to be excavated and studied has been nicknamed the House of Lorio because there's an area of the home dedicated to the worship of domestic spirits called Laris. The house has a courtyard and is beautifully adorned, but the owner's budget clearly didn't extend to decorating the whole property, as there are also bare rooms with earthen floors. Still, there are bed frames with traces of fabric from pillows and bed sheets indicating that the people who lived here did so in comfort. The 2022 Winter Olympics were held in Beijing. Hosting an event of that magnitude necessitates the construction of an Olympic village for athletes. And during the construction of that village, a remarkable discovery was made in Zhangjiakou City in Hebei Province. There, construction workers unearthed what was later confirmed by archaeologists to be a Jin Dynasty summer palace from the early 13th century. It was a find of such magnitude that the Olympic village had to be relocated so as to not further damage the remains of the palace. Discoveries made among the ruins include priceless ceramics, textiles, and elaborate dragon head sculptures. The foundations of 67 separate buildings have been found at the site, along with 14 roads and the ancient palace walls. This is almost certainly the long-lost Tei Palace, built for Emperor Wang Yanzheng in the year 1202. If so, it's the first Jin Dynasty palace complex ever to be unearthed. The Olympics are over now, but the work of archaeologists in digging through the remains of the palace and cataloging the various artifacts found here has only just begun. Discovery that took place in October 2022. It's a tiny Viking-era discovery, and it has historians in the region very excited. This tiny lead Thor's hammer amulet is believed to date to the 10th century and is the first artifact of its kind ever to be discovered in Holland. The discovery was made by accident during the development of a site for housing construction. The hammer is barely over an inch long, but it's surprisingly detailed and can be easily identified as Mjolnir, the legendary hammer of the great god Thor. There's a hole in the shaft of the artifact where a string could be threaded, allowing the amulet to be worn around the neck of its owner. The people who wore these amulets during the Viking era did so in the belief that they had magical powers that would help them ward off the effects of evil. Roughly 1,000 of them have been found by archaeologists, but they're often found in places like the UK, Russia, and across the Baltic region, rather than in Sweden. This particular amulet is significant because it comes from a time when the Vikings were beginning to turn to Christianity. Whoever owned the amulet wasn't quite ready to let go of their old gods. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, and you'll be the first to know when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching.